The topic today is the Doing Business report issued by the World Bank. This committee has jurisdiction not directly over the World Bank, and I often wish that we did, but it is an international organization, and what we do have is jurisdiction over the relationship of the United States government to the bank. Funding requests come through us, and legislation that deals with the terms under which the United States executive directors, the voting members of the bank board, should function also come through us. One of the major concerns of this committee, particularly those of us on the majority side, is the dilemma we face in a world in which increased wealth has been accompanied to a distressing extent by increased inequality. There has been a history in judging the success of economic development policies to look at countries as if they were undivided wholes and to talk about the increase in percentages in gross domestic product of this or that country. That's important. But increases in gross domestic product, which are overwhelmingly enjoyed by a very small percentage of the residents of that country, are much less of a good thing. And we have this problem here in the United States, but it's a problem elsewhere in the world, where the way in which growth has gone forward recently, a combination of technology, of globalization, essentially what we've seen in recent years is a great freeing from constraint of capital. Both technically and legally, capital has been empowered to move very rapidly. That has very good aspects. It can get to the point where it does the most overall good. But it has allowed the owners of capital to leave everybody else very much behind in the sharing of these benefits. Now, that's been a particular problem in the United States. A couple of months ago, to the dismay of many in the business community and elsewhere, the immigration bill blew up. The president's ability to negotiate trade treaties was allowed to die. There's an effort now led by Democratic leaders of the Ways and Means Committee to put forward a treaty with Peru, which accomplishes some of the goals that Democrats have long had in the areas of labor and environmental rights, but it's still controversial, including with many who had previously been advocates of that. And the problems with trade, the problems with what I think is an excessive sensitivity to foreign investment, a skepticism about foreign investment that's unjustified as a general principle, the concerns with immigration, objections we have in some cases to allowing businesses fully to adopt more productive technology. It stems in the United States from the unhappiness that the fruits of these policies are so unfairly shared. We did a round table on the paper put forward by Don Evans, President Bush's first Secretary of Commerce, documenting how badly wealth has been distributed, how much has gone to a relatively small number of people, and how the great bulk of people have received nothing. And this was a report put out by a former member of the current President's Council of Economic Advisors, the former Undersecretary of Commerce for Trade. We have a serious problem. We are trying to deal with it here, but it's an international problem. And we have seen, I believe, some improvement in the orientation of the international financial institutions. It's fairly recent. During the Asian crisis in particular of 10 years ago or so, I believe the IMF in particular was playing a very retrograde role. It was imposing on countries a degree of repressive economic policies that were not responsive to the problem. You don't solve a liquidity crisis by cutting wages. And it had negative social consequences. The World Bank has begun to address this on the one hand, but what I hear and what I read from some of the testimony is a certain schizophrenia in the bank. At least at the operational level on its own, the bank talks about trying to pay attention to the distributional qualities. But the Doing Business report that the bank puts out and some of the work of the IFC take a very different view. Essentially, what we get from the Doing Business report is that the nicer you are to your workers, the worse you are as a place to do business. It is an extraordinarily, I think, simplistic and regressive approach. And while the Doing Business report, they say, well, it doesn't have actual binding effect. Of course it's important, or they wouldn't put it out. There's some evidence that it has some impact on some of the country assessment strategies, not on all of them. It is simply wrong for the major international institution in the World Bank, to be putting out a report in which the worse you treat your workers, everything else being equal, the better you are rated. That is not only wrong in itself, but I want to go back to this other point. We have a certain unhappiness in America at the rise of regimes with whom we disagree. It is not in the interest of the world, of the U.S., for kind of pro-Western democracy to be associated with unfair economic distribution. It is, in fact, not a good idea in general for people to get the sense that a free enterprise system, a capitalist system, means the rich get richer and the middle class get nothing and the poor get poorer. So we're not just talking here about a moral imperative to be fair. We are talking about what I believe is one of the most difficult obstacles to the kind of economic policy many in the business community and elsewhere would like to see. Yes, I think in the right circumstances, an embrace of technology and of globalization can produce greater benefits for everybody, but only if we combat the natural tendency for those benefits to be so unequally shared. And no one's talking about equalization. I shouldn't have said equally, less unequally. Inequality is a very good thing. It's necessary in a capitalist system. But excessive inequality can become politically dysfunctional, and to the extent that it begins to depress consumption, depress savings rates, it can become economically dysfunctional. I think we're at that point in the world, and it troubles me to see the Doing Business report of the World Bank reinforcing those tendencies to the extent that it has an influence. And I now recognize the gentleman from Delaware.